While A24 has made some of the best comedies this year, with movies that lean into darker territory like Sorry Baby and Friendship, their more high-concept 2025 offerings have been fairly mediocre. Opus was a disappointing melding of cults and pop culture that didn't mesh well, while Death of a Unicorn was a weak installment in the Eat the Rich genre of films. But A24 is ending the year on a high note with Eternity from director David Freyne, which takes a fun afterlife twist on the love triangle that's both charming and clever, even if it doesn't do quite enough with its concept.
What is Eternity about?
Larry and Joan have been together for 65 years, a couple who have lived a full life together, have kids and grandkids, and know everything about each other. When Larry unexpectedly chokes on a pretzel and dies at his granddaughter's gender reveal party, he wakes up younger in the afterlife. It turns out that when you die, you go to what is essentially a big train station and decide what type of eternity you want to have. And then you head on a train to your true final destination, never to return. Considering Larry knows Joan had cancer, he decides to wait for her at this station so they can decide their eternity together. However, what Larry doesn't expect is that Joan's first husband, Luke, who died in the Korean War shortly after they were married, has also been waiting decades for Joan. When Joan does arrive, she's faced with an impossible decision. Does she spend eternity with the man she had a full life with, or does she give the man who was taken away from her a chance to see what their life together would have been like?
Eternity has a cool concept, but doesn't do enough with it.
Written by Pat Cunane, the team behind Eternity clearly had fun coming up with the basics of how the afterlife works. Considering that this station also has a convention floor of people trying to sell their afterlives to newcomers, we get quick glimpses of what many of these afterlives could be, from one based around Studio 54 to another that has no men, and one entirely centered around cigarettes. The bureaucracy and matter-of-fact approach to this world is quite fun, and there are cute ideas throughout. For example, people arrive in the afterlife at the point when they were happiest, hence why there are so many 10-year-olds and hardly any teenagers. It's all brought to life by a very classic, realistic mod style that is fun, but still feels slightly outdated, from the trains to the hotel-like rooms the new arrivals stay in. Sure, it's the afterlife, but it's also a place where people stay in dumpy one-bedroom apartments if they're there for more than a week, and the sky is painted onto a massive sheet. However, this world also feels underutilized, considering the possibilities inherent in creating your own afterlife. Beyond the possible eternities that can be explored, any larger questions or explanations of what's going on are mostly shrugged off. Granted, this avoiding of any deeper answers is usually done by the two afterlife coordinators that we meet, played by the great Divine Joy Randolph and John Early, who easily steal every scene they're in. Randolph has a fun rapport with Teller, while Early is hilarious alongside Olsen, and it's always a blast when they pop back in. But for the most part, Eternity brushes away any deeper questions you might have about this scenario. Maybe even worse is the fact that we don't really get to see much of these various eternities. And when we do, it's underwhelming. There's a lot to like about the world that we do get, but it's also difficult not to think of the potential that is lost.
Elizabeth Olsen, Miles Teller, and Callum Turner make a great love triangle.
Thankfully, the primary trio of Olsen, Teller, and Turner is so fantastic together that it's hard to get too lost in the afterlife lore anyway. Freyne and Cunane do a nice job of mostly not favoring Larry or Luke in this decision, as it's very clear in every moment why Joan would have such a struggle with this choice. Teller brings a real old man energy to Larry, and he's goofy in a way that makes him endearing. Everyone tells Turner's Luke that he's perfect, and for the most part he is, but Turner also plays Luke with an underlying frustration that he now has to deal with this after tending bar for decades at the station waiting for Joan. Olsen is also wonderful as Joan, as she's overwhelmed, confused, and aware of the gravity of the situation. But when you put all three of these leads together, it's almost always winning. Eternity has a very classic feel to it that works well for this concept. It's not necessarily prudish, but it does seem like a rom-com that could have come out in the 1950s with just a few changes to still keep it for a modern audience. It's hard not to think of Albert Brooks' Defending Your Life, or even Powell and Pressburger's A Matter of Life and Death in its romantic approach to the afterlife. Like those films, Eternity finds a solid balance of humor, romance, and actual stakes, and there's certainly a weight to what Joan will choose right down to the very end. Eternity manages to be entertaining while also centering around the most important, dire decision of Joan's life. Even though it does seem like the ending keeps going and going, there's a nice emotional heft to where the story ends up, which makes the extra steps in getting there worth it. Eternity is a step in the right direction for the more ambitious comedies coming out of A24, while also having a broader appeal, which the studio has struggled with. It's also one of the better theatrical romances to come out in a while, acting almost like a post-life Challengers, just with death instead of tennis. Eternity might not hit the heights it could have with its concept, but it's pretty heavenly regardless. Eternity had its premiere at the 2025 Toronto International Film Festival. Eternity comes to theaters on November 26.